As always, one half your host, Craig Allen. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram. You know where it is, at Craig Allen FNP. With me to my left, to your right, Matt Allen. Respective socials, at Matt Allen FNP. If you're anything like me, you'll love going to UFC.com, scrolling at the bottom. If there's ever a Q&A, you read those. Because sometimes they get downright wacky weird. For me, I read it last weekend. It was the fact that Colin Anglin, Brendan Fitzgerald took that one, beat it over the head. But the fact that Colin Anglin took an amateur fight before he even started training in MMA. My favorite one this week from Ed Herman's page, and I wrote it down. It was, do you have any heroes? His response, my dad, that guy that you might have seen on Pornhub one time, Randy Couture, and Dan Gable. And then the next question was, favorite grappling technique? His response, 2 words, physical domination. Matt, we have Ed Herman. He's taking on Alonzo Menifield. And I feel like if Ed Herman dusts off the wrestling shoes, that could make this one a little interesting. But for Ed Herman, late career resurgence, 3 wins in a row. He kicked poor Mike Rodriguez's nuts in his chest and ended up having a weird fight in that one. But ultimately gets the win. And Matt, in that fight, yeah, it was a really weird one against Mike Rodriguez. Before that, he beats Hadish Ibrahimov. Before that, a win over Patrick Cummins. Before that, he beat Jean Valente in Moncton, New Brunswick, Canada. You can never take that one away from me. Again, Jean won that one by split decision, but I'll forever hold that one in my heart. As an Ed Herman win, Matt, taking on Alonzo Menifield, who was on a 2-fight losing streak before he took on a short notice opponent in Fabio Charant. The weirdest thing was, he was training for William Knight in that fight, where I would have thought, okay, we're going to strike, because William's going to try and take me down. He goes up against Fabio Charant, pushes him against the cage, which, that's a no-go when you're taking on Fabio. He has great defensive submissions. What does Fabio do? Pulls in for a submission. Uh-oh. You know exactly what's going to happen now. No, you don't, because Alonzo Menifield puts all of that upper body strength in his Tasmanian Devil frame and got him in a weird Von Flu. And it was absolutely insane. So for Alonzo Menifield, crazy win his last time out. He is a first-round king. He makes it a squash match. He's taken on a gritty old veteran, a short fuse Ed Herman, a guy that lost on The Ultimate Fighter to Kendall Grove years ago. Kendall Grove, that's crazy. But Matt, I think this is a great fight. It's a great litmus test for both guys. Alonzo Menifield, little bit of an older prospect at 33 with only 12 pro fights. Ed Herman is almost 41. He's had many pro fights. He's had 40 of them. So 40 pro fights, 40 years old. What are your thoughts?
Does Ed Herman need a litmus test fight? He's 41 years old. Ed Herman's been fighting longer than I've been alive. Almost. But the fact that that stat is almost true is very alarming. And here's the problem. You bring up Ed Herman, if he dusts off the wrestling shoes, he can make this fight interesting. I don't think so. I'm one of the bigger Ed Herman old man strength believers, but this is one of those fights where even I'm having a hard time seeing where Ed Herman's going to succeed, because I understand that Alonzo Menifield has some similarities with Hadish Ibrahimov, and where he will get tired as the fight progresses, and if you can make the fight ugly, then maybe you can beat him. The issue is that Ed Herman is 41 years old, and when he does get hit clean, he still gets hurt. He doesn't go down. He's not like Matt Brown, for instance, who doesn't have a great chin, but can still get into crazy fights. He still has a good chin, but when you hit him clean, he goes down. He at least gets hurt.
He's the type of guy that goes to put a well cap on, severs his finger, grabs the finger, and puts it back on.
Exactly. Like, Ed Herman is, like, neighborhood tough, you know?
That's not a joke. That's a real thing. Google it.
He was getting an artesian well put in, and he wanted to know how to do some of the work himself, so he was giving the guy a hand, and he gave him more than just a hand in a figurative term. Here's the thing. Alonzo Menifield's going to probably knock out Ed Herman, and I'll be sad because of it, but that really is the prediction. Alonzo Menifield's so much bigger than Ed Herman, it's not even funny. This is one of those fights where I actually do feel like size and physicality will play a role, because I understand Ed Herman's 6'1" and Menifield's 6 feet tall, but let's not be selling wolf tickets. By the time these guys rehydrate, Menifield will be the much bigger fighter. And the problem is that Menifield throws a lot of single shots, which normally you don't really like, but the fact that he does throw single shots means he doesn't normally get tired just by striking. If you do get into a striking fight with Menifield, he can keep pace with you throughout 15 minutes. The problem with Menifield is that if you do start engaging in grappling, then he can tire down. The problem is that he's so much stronger than Ed Herman in a lot of these grappling exchanges that I don't feel like Ed Herman will be the one chaining takedowns together. I feel like he might go for one, kind of meet the hips of Menifield and be like, okay, now we're back to striking. And with Ed Herman, he can get strikes together, and when he does do it, they can start to put some damage up. But the problem with Menifield is, look at the fight with OSP before he gets knocked out by OSP. I understand it's a loss in his record, and getting knocked out by Owen St. Preux is never a good thing. But the base game plan is kind of there. It's move forward. Don't throw a crazy amount of volume, but just keep a consistent level of volume throughout the first round. And that's what Menifield was starting to do. Now, yes, he walked into a big shot from OSP, but Ed Herman does not have OSP power at this weight class. Like, Ed Herman has respectable power, but he really does need volume to go out there and hurt a guy. Pat Cummins was also a very old man by the time those two fought, so I know that was a TKO, but I really don't expect Ed Herman to knee Alonzo Menifield in a weird wrestling exchange and then knock him out. It's really tough for me to find ways for a 40-year-old Ed Herman to beat Menifield. I do think he can get together some decent combinations, but again, I bring up the point that did not work out for me last week in the main event, that Ed Herman is going to need volume, and that's going to keep him in the pocket. And with Menifield, I know he's not this crippling knockout artist by any means, but he does have respectable power at the 205-pound division, and I do think he's going to land on Ed Herman at some point.
I'm eager to see the kicks of Menifield, how Herman deals with them. And again, if we're in the pocket, maybe Ed Herman's able to land some volume. So you might want to look at this one, second round, third round. Where are we at going in, if we even make it that far? But to pick off the hop is Alonzo Menifield. I look at the odds for this one. Menifield open to minus 140 favorite. He's minus 244 right now. Ed Herman open to plus 120. He's a plus 195 underdog. Tapology votes? They're not very close. 882 total votes, 85% Menifield, 87% by knockout. For the 15% that have Herman, 50% by decision, 22% by submission, 21% by knockout. Matt, that doesn't add up to a clean 100%, but it's Tapology, and we have fun with it. I love Ed Herman, the fighter, but I don't have him in this fight. Again, if he's able to win, second round, third round, maybe you look at like a sneaky submission, maybe you look at it by decision. But for me, I like Menifield in this fight. I think he's going to be able to get the job done.
I feel like his wrestling defense is good enough to beat a guy like Ed Herman. It might not be good enough to take on Bellator's own Corey Anderson, or maybe, some of those
or
level.
Like Devin Clark, like when they fought.
Devin Clark, yeah, that's a good example too. Just, the next level wrestler. Ed Herman, I don't think is that next level wrestler. He's a good wrestler, but again, he really does weaponize his pace and cardio, and until that becomes a factor, I don't think he's going to win a lot of the open space exchanges with Menifield. So for me, I have to pick Menifield, but no one would be happier if a 41-year-old Ed Herman found himself on a 4-fight win streak. Like, that's one of those, like, when Shogun, I know Shogun's only like 29 years old, but still, when Shogun somehow got on a winning streak and then Daniel Cormier was like, I might fight him next. I'm not saying Ed Herman versus Israel Adesanya will ever happen, but if it did ever happen, I would at least buy it.
Matt, there's been a lot of underdogs hitting lately, so maybe you like Ed Herman. You let us know down below in the comment section. You call us donkeys, you call us whatever you want. But we both have Atomic Alonzo Menifield in this one. Can't wait for the fight. Moving up a weight class in the main event. Interim strap on the line. Derrick Lewis taking on the man himself, Cyril Gane. You're not going to want to miss that. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say. Let's get into it.